This is the article titled Middle School is Always Hard and the Pandemic Made It Worse. Here's what these kids need now. In mid November, Dana Diaz, the superintendent of the Reynolds School District in Oregon, announced that Reynolds Middle School was reverting temporarily to remote learning, but not because of a high number of coronavirus cases. The reason? Troubling behavior by students. In a November 16th letter to families, Diaz said that some students are struggling with the socialization skills necessary for in-person learning, which is causing disruption in school for other students. To ensure Reynolds Middle School has the necessary social emotional supports and safety protocols in place to provide a safe learning environment for all students, the school will be temporarily transitioning to short-term distance learning for approximately 2 weeks, she wrote. During the closure of the school, which ends December 7th, administrators, teachers, and support staffers will work to implement operational safety procedures for the return to in-person learning, she wrote. Reynolds is hardly the only school where students have been acting out since the 2021-2022 academic year began. The continuing pandemic upended the lives of Americans starting in spring 2020 and shuttered most schools for many months. Children and adolescents were isolated at home for months, and this fall brought the stress and anxiety they were carrying into school buildings. Middle school has long been difficult for young people to navigate, in part because children are becoming adolescents and social pressures increase. Add to that complications, grief, mental health issues, etc., brought on by the pandemic, and middle school right now may be more difficult than ever. To understand the pandemic's impact on middle schoolers, picture the pain of lunchtime. A bunch of uncomfortable adolescents are navigating social distancing rules while figuring out when and if to take down their masks. It's not going well. Some have given up eating lunch entirely, which worries Phyllis Fagel, a school counselor and author of the book Middle School Matters. She knows this age group, and she knows all this anxiety is not just about masks. It's about everything. They feel really self-conscious and vulnerable, said Fagel, who has observed a spike in eating disorders since students returned full-time this fall, one of many re-entry issues educators are concerned about. If being isolated at home last year was tough, it turns out being back full-time is also filled with challenges for our eye-rolling, head-shaking, serial texting middle schoolers who are enduring a time of life I once deemed the age of embarrassment. The pandemic left many of them behind, both academically and socially, at a most unfortunate phase, an awkward time when they are separating from parents and figuring out who they are and want to be. Their bodies and voices may feel as unfamiliar as their friend groups after so much time apart or under strict pandemic limitations. Middle schoolers, studies confirm, are experiencing more trauma and mental health issues than ever before, something I heard plenty about during a recent virtual conference of the world's largest association of middle school educators, at a time when major pediatric groups say the state of children's mental health should be considered a national emergency. We should spend more time listening to them and asking them, middle schoolers, for insights, said Lisa Harrison, an associate professor of teacher education at Ohio University, who spoke on a panel about what a successful middle school of the future might look like. They are spot on with so many levels of what we should be doing. Many of the panelists underscored what the Hechinger report has observed after many months of reporting on this age group. There's a lot of work ahead to figure out how to help middle schoolers heal, and their voices must be part of the discussion. Students who spoke during the conference had plenty to say. They asked for more course choices, including classes in engineering, coding, and additional languages like Arabic. They want a warm, welcoming environment, a space so safe and cozy they don't want to leave. One wanted evidence that Black and Hispanic lives matter. Another wanted more life lessons and career training. Another said they do not appreciate being yelled at. Middle school should be a place where we can talk about struggles at home, like depression and anxiety, said Sudiksha Darali, a 13-year-old student at Western Middle School for the Arts in Louisville, Kentucky. Several emphasized what became a main conference theme. They want relationships with adults they trust. Here's proof of how mixed up middle schoolers are. As students came back to their school buildings this year, more were acting out. Some principals discovered acts of vandalism like ripping up soap dispensers, said Joseph Mazza, principal of Seven Bridges Middle School in suburban Westchester County, New York. And even though his school's sports and clubs are back in action and students have been able to eat lunch outside, the school's PTA bought picnic tables for outdoor dining. Personal losses and general anxiety related to the pandemic keeps school from feeling back to normal. With the virus still circulating, a student who has been exposed on any given day may be sent home. Amid such confusion and uncertainty, opportunities for leadership for this age group have become particularly important, said Mazza, who along with Fagel hosts a podcast on middle schoolers. These kids want activities that put them in the driver's seat, he said, along with time to speak about what's on their minds. I reached out to other educators in search of solutions and heard many that made enormous sense, such as small advisory group meetings and rooms staffed with counselors where students can come in, get a glass of water, chat with an adult, or simply draw and paint. Carrie Siddons, the assistant principal at Cabin John Middle School in Potomac, Maryland, said the school has added morning mindfulness sessions, a space where students can practice breathing for 15 minutes and talk to a counselor who is leading sessions. The staff has been really attuned to the fact that there is a lot of emotional support needed, Siddons told me. School-wide, lessons on topics like bullying and identity have helped students. Fagel and other educators shared tips, from establishing comforting routines to dressing up alongside students for a spirit week and playing funny music or YouTube videos during that fraught and uncomfortable lunch hour. Sage Smith, a middle school teacher and motivational speaker in Cleveland, Tennessee, also urged middle school teachers to take care of themselves so they can fully be there for students and help them create a world where they can feel some peace. That means also being aware of the toll the pandemic has taken on them as well as their students. I've come to realize that if great teachers are going to stay in their classrooms, they need support, Smith said. All right, so here are 3 questions that you need to respond to regarding this article. So number 1, what support does the author provide for the statement, middle school right now may be more difficult than ever? What support does the author provide for the statement, middle school right now may be more difficult than ever? So you'll need to go back up to the first page. Let's see. So we have this first section is just about how some districts have gone to remote learning for a little bit of time for students to kind of work through some of the behaviors. So right here it says, it's been difficult for young people to navigate because they're becoming adolescents in social pressure. And here it's like providing you with some information about like how the pandemic complicates that even more. She says that there's grief and mental health issues. She gave an example of lunchtime trying to social distance, figure out when to wear a mask during lunch, and that you're still feeling like awkward anyway. So it says they feel self-conscious and vulnerable. This Fagel, she's an author of the book Middle School Matters, so that makes her a authority on this subject matter, and that would provide evidence. So if there's things in here that could be quoted to answer that first question, which was, what support does the author provide? So I kind of gave you some ideas if you go back up to that first page. The second question is, explain whether you agree or disagree with this statement. The pandemic left many of them behind, them being middle schoolers, both academically, that means with your classes, and socially, that means with your friends. So you got left behind because of the pandemic at a most unfortunate phase or time. So an awkward time when they are separating from parents and figure out who they are and want to be. So do you agree that that many of your peers suffered from the pandemic in your classes and socially? So do you agree that there were that the pandemic caused problems with learning and with your friends? So do you agree with that? Right? Yes, I agree. And explain why you agree. Like, if you had experience with that, have you seen your friends have difficulties? Do you have difficulties? So if you say yes or no, explain why you think the pandemic had an impact on middle schoolers. The third question, the author states there's a lot of work ahead to figure out how to help middle schoolers heal, and their voices must be part of the discussion. So here's your opportunity to tell us, what you're most challenged by during this time in your life. What's difficult for you? Is it social, emotional? Is it academic? Are you having difficulty with your classes because you kind of didn't learn a lot last year? Or are you feeling left out with your friends? So you've got an opportunity to say how you're feeling right now after we've been back at school after the pandemic. All right, so that's the assignment. So you listen to the article, which kind of covers some information about dealing with being back at school and then answering these questions.